Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military of a Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 3rd of October of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. During the previous video, we were already talking about massive drone and missile strike that took place during the previous night between the 2nd and the 3rd of October, and this morning the pro-Ukraine resources published this photo where we can see the approximate routes of Russian drones and missiles, and during the day, as we discussed in the previous video, we got additional updates about this attack. So the sources are saying that the Russians attacked the energy facilities, more precisely the gas transportation systems and the gas mining systems. So the Russians destroyed everything that Ukrainians can use during the next upcoming winter period of time. So obviously, based on these attacks, based on these reports, we can make a conclusion that the Russians are tasked to finish the battle with Ukraine, to finish the war in Ukraine this year. Most likely the Russians will create such a conditions for Ukrainians, so they will not be able to survive during this upcoming winter. Obviously, this is going to be a very difficult period for Ukrainians. During the day, we got several statements that were made by Ukrainian authorities, and the first one is that according to information we have, the attack on gas production infrastructure was the most massive since 2022. The company confirmed strikes on facilities in the Kharkiv and Poltava regions. 35 missiles, including many ballistic missiles, and 60 drones were fired at them. A significant number of facilities were damaged, some critically. So the Russians during the previous days were attacking Ukrainian energy facilities, and we have a lot of updates about power outages all over the entire territory of Ukraine. For example, this is the city of Chernihiv. As you can see, there is no light at all at the territory of the city. Now the Russians, when they finished with energy facilities and energy infrastructure in the east and the northeastern part of Ukraine, pointed their focus on gas transportation systems and facilities. Lots of explosions. All of these icons on the map that you can see where the icon of explosion are the icons where Russians attack gas transportation systems and facilities of Ukraine. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians continued their offensive operation, and the sources are saying that the Russians managed to improve their positions to the west of the settlement by the name of Verbova. This information today was provided by pro-Russian resources. At the same time, pro-Ukraine resources reported that they counter-attacked Russians in this area, and that as a result of counter-offensive, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the western part of the settlement. And in this video we can see how Ukrainians, as a result of counter-offensive operation, managed to enter the central part of the settlement and to raise their flag. So I would like to remind you that just several days ago the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the settlement of Verbova was captured by Russians completely. This was reported by the 1st of October of 2025. By the 2nd of October of 2025, several neutral mappers confirmed that the Russians managed to secure not just the central and eastern parts of the settlement, but also the Russians captured the western part. And today we got the report published by Ukrainian resources. According to this one, the Ukrainians counter-attacked and to restore control over the territory. So as for now, we don't know for sure whether this is a real Ukrainian counter-attack or this is another media counter-attack carried out by Ukrainians just with one purpose: to raise the flag and to make a media victory, then to show to Ukrainians, telling them that the situation is not so critical as the Russians reporting, that Ukrainians control the situation, and if the Ukrainians are falling back, they are falling back very slowly. Anyway, we start receiving the first videos from the settlements of Vishnyovo. As you can see, the Russians in this area were attacking Ukrainian equipment, communication equipment, and as a result of this attack, several very important facilities were damaged and destroyed. And this video confirms that the Russians began preparation before moving further in the western direction with the purpose to take under complete control the settlement of Vishnyovo, which is a strategical settlement in this direction, because if Russians capture the settlement of Vishnyovo, the logistic of the entire Zaporozhye direction would collapse. We're talking about Ukrainian logistic. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Novopavlovka direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates. The Russians continue offensive operation in the area of the settlement by the name of Ivanovka, and during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. This is the situation by the end of the 2nd of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of October of 2025. As a result of clashes, as you can see, the Russians managed to cross the river of Volcha at multiple places and to establish control over additional buildings and constructions on the Ukrainian side. So there are very heavy clashes for the settlement. This is another key village in this area. At the same time, the Ukrainians are trying to concentrate their units and their forces in the area of the village of Gavrilovka. The Ukrainians are using this village as a logistic hub. Then, when the Ukrainians are able to concentrate additional group of forces, they send these units further in the eastern direction with the purpose to support their contingent on the territory of Ivanovka. The Russians control the situation, and when they discover another temporary deployment point of Ukrainians, they destroy it. So this is very important, the village of Ivanovka, because the main settlement in this direction is the settlement of Novopavlovka, which has just two supply lines. The first one goes from the north in the southern direction, and the second one goes from the settlement of Novopavlovka in the western direction towards the settlement of Gavrilovka. If Russians are able to cut this road by taking under control the settlement of Ivanovka, then the village of Novopavlovka would be caught in cauldron. The thing is that several days ago, if you remember, we got the video where Russians were bombing the main logistic roads in the area of Novopavlovka, and for example, in this video we can see how Russians, as a result of FAB attack, aviation strike, managed to destroy the bridge to the north of the settlement, which means that currently the Ukrainians in the area of the settlement of Novopavlovka suffer huge problems with supply and support. Obviously, the Russians will use this advantage situation with the purpose to take the settlement under complete control. If Russians take under control the village of Novopavlovka, they will be able to get the operational space with the purpose to move further deep inside of the Dnipro region without any resistance from the Ukrainian side. The situation on the line between the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporozhye areas is very difficult for Ukrainians. They're trying to stabilize the situation, but we see that they still haven't managed to do this. Now let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk. We haven't been receiving almost anything for a very long period of time, and today, for the first time probably for 2 or 3 weeks, we got a very important big update about the situation in the city of Pokrovsk, more precisely in its western part and the southeastern part. So let's discuss in details. First, let's take a look at how the map looked like at the end of the 2nd of October. So this is the situation by the end of the previous days. The previous day, as you can see, the Russians were controlling mainly just the southern and the southwestern parts of the settlement, and this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of October of 2025. The Russians are finishing the battle for the territory along the railways between the settlement of Kotlina and the western part of the city of Pokrovsk. Very important area. Furthermore, as you can see, the Russians managed to cut this area into pieces. Now the Russians will handle with every single pocket separately. They will try to force the Ukrainians to fall back further in the northern direction. Furthermore, the Russians are trying to take this territory under complete control. If the Russians can do this, they will be able then to move further in the direction of the industrial zone on the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk. I would like to remind you that this industrial zone is the place for a major battle, that is going to take place for the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration. Because if Russians somehow are able to cross the railways and to enter this industrial zone and to conquer this industrial zone, this will lead to the situation when Ukrainians would be caught in cauldron completely. We're talking about the central part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration and the eastern part, because from the industrial zone the Russians would be able to establish complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines that goes a bit further to the north. So this is very important area, and we see that the Russians are improving their positions. So once again, this is the situation by the end of the 2nd of October, and this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of October. As for now, the industrial zone is under complete control of the armored forces of Ukraine, but we see what the Russians are tasked for and where the Russians are moving. Furthermore, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their position significantly in the southeastern part of the city of Pokrovsk. As you can see now, the Russians are trying to encircle Ukrainians who are currently located in the area of the Shakhtarsky, Lazurny, and the Sonychny micro districts. So this is the southern citadel of the city of Pokrovsk, which is almost encircled by the Russians. Currently, the Russians control around 20% of the citadel. The Ukrainians control 80%, but Ukrainians, as you can see, according to this configuration of the map, were already encircled by Russians. So if Russians continue tightening the news in the Sonychny micro district, at the end this can force Ukrainians to fall back from this area in the eastern direction towards the railways. But the main problem for Ukrainians is that the Russians are advancing in the southern direction as well, with the purpose to get as close as possible to the settlement of Gnatovka. It seems that the Russians are planning to encircle Ukrainians and to save these buildings. These are very important buildings and very important block for the next stages of the battle for the city of Pokrovsk. So the situation, as you can see, is very difficult and very complicated for the armed forces of Ukraine. The battle of Pokrovsk obviously develops in the Russian favor. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Konstantinovka. We haven't been receiving anything from this area for a very long period of time. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the settlement of Konstantinovka, its southeastern part, but without any changes on the ground. The Russians are saying that Ukrainians continue concentrating their forces in the city, moving more and more units and redeployments and forces in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation and not to allow the Russians to enter the city. Now let's talk about the Sivers direction. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. According to information we have, the Russians began assault operation on this company stronghold, which is located on the way towards the city of Siversk itself. The pro-Ukrainian resources published this photo where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in trenches and fortifications in this area. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. So this is the situation by the end of the 2nd of October, and this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of October. This is a very important stronghold. If Russians can take this stronghold under complete control, this will allow the Russians to encircle the Ukrainians in this pocket, because from this stronghold the Russians most likely will move further in the western direction with the purpose to move in the direction of Russian forces who are currently attacking the settlement of Zvanovka from the south. So here we might see another cauldron created by Russians in coming days. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kupiansk direction, where the Russians also continue their offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, additional and very important changes on the ground were recorded in the city of Kupiansk itself. Several pro-Russian resources reported that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly and that a very huge contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine were encircled. So let's discuss everything in details. So this is the situation by the end of the 2nd of October, and this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of October. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions in the western and the northwestern parts of the city of Kupiansk. And currently, as you can see, the Ukrainians who are still located in the area of the railways and in the central part where Kotsin Cauldron, currently the distance between positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation is already less than 200 meters. And we understand that Ukrainians have no chances to escape this cauldron through this corridor, because they would be destroyed basically by FPV drones. And even if Ukrainians are able to escape this cauldron using this very short corridor, they will face the river Voskol right in front of them. And from these positions, the Ukrainians will have just several probably options, either to move further in the southern direction, but here they would be under attack by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, because the Russians in this area are located on the elevation, or to move further in the eastern direction, but for these purposes the Ukrainians would be forced to cross the river Voskol, and during this period of year this is not a very good idea. The Russians will also attack them with FPV drones. So it seems that we're about to see the collapse of the entire city of Kupiansk, at least of its western and northwestern and the southwestern parts, the most important parts, because if the western part of the city of Kupiansk falls, this will lead to automatic and complete collapse of the eastern part of the city of Kupiansk and everything to the east. We're talking about the settlements of Kucherevka, Podol, and Petropavlovka. Ukrainians Russians most likely will retreat in the southern direction with the purpose to organize defense around the settlements of Sadovo, Osinovo, and the city of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy, Kovsharovka. So this is going to be the final battle for the entire Kupiansk direction, but it seems that Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions for a very long period of time, because the Russians will have better positions in the city of Kupiansk, and the Russians, of course, will continue encircling Ukrainians using these roads of attack through the Blagodatovka and Baldyrivka. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Volchansk. The Russians continue offensive operation in this area as well. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes were recorded on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha. The pro-Russian resources published lots of reports about clashes in this direction, and pro-Ukraine resources published several videos where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers with FPV drones. Lots of episodes were geolocated in this part of the city of Kupiansk. Attacks were concluded not just by FPV drones but also with aviation. All these videos confirmed that the Russians have a very strong foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha, and that the Russians are planning to finish the battle for the city of Volchansk in coming weeks. And right after the end of the battle for the city of Volchansk, the Russians will continue advancing further in the southeastern direction towards the settlement, towards the next settlement in this area, the settlement by the name of Bely Kolodez. At the same time, most likely we should expect the development of Russian offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Veliki Burluk. If Russians establish control over these two settlements and the city of Kupiansk and the city of Volchansk, the Russians will be able to restore the railway service in this area. So there is a railways that goes exactly using along this line, and if Russians do this, they will be able to improve their logistic, and they will be able to begin most likely even the Kharkiv offensive operation. This time the city of Kharkiv would be attacked from the south and from the southeast. And that's it for today. Military with Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.